Alrighty, how you guys doing today? Today we are going to be going over a little bit more advanced positions, pawn positions, and specifically a concept called opposition. This concept it is most prevalent in games, and especially pawn in games. It can be very important. But what opposition is as you can see, these two kings are opposed, meaning that they are occupying. Um, that meaning that they are there's one square space in between them, and they're on the same file. Um, and so whoever has the opposition is, whenever you're in this position, whoever's turn it is to move, their opponent has the opposition. And the reason is because the opponent's king has to give, right? As you can see here, any move the black king makes is not gaining any space; it's actually giving it up. Um, So if the black moves to either side, the king gets either of these flank squares. White's king gets either of these flank squares to advance. And so here it is said that white has the opposition. The opposition is very important in a lot of these pawn endings. So here, set up this position on your board. It's black to move, but you're going to be playing white. And black's first move is going to be d5. So see if you can solve this position and try to reach that position that we were going over earlier, where black king, white king, and the pawn are opposed, and you know how to win that position. Alrighty, so pause the video. Alrighty, I hope you solved it. The best way to go about this is king f4, and this kind of seems a little bit counterintuitive. It seems like you should maintain the opposition. And okay, yeah, now this is good because I have the opposition again. He has to move, but he can just move back in front of the pawn, and now you're repeating moves, and this is not going to turn out so well for you, as you aren't making any forward progress as white. F4 is instead the way to go, and as you can see, what you're doing is you're securing the advance of your pawn here. And so if black were to go for your pawn, you can just push your pawn up the board with checks. Of course, you need to be careful about how far you push it. And I guess I'll go through that example right now. For instance, if he comes here, you should mirror him so that he can't cross back over into the line, and also your pawn box has been there, so he can't go for your pawn by jumping to that square. And then even here, you can still advance your pawn. If he probably the most accurate move is for him to come up and try to occupy the square again, but then you gain the opposition once again. And now black has to make another move to submit to submit some space, and after he does, you can make the similar maneuver, and if he comes back, you can reach this position. And then we know how to play from here, as we've gone through that. However, this is probably not the most accurate way for black to play. But it's important to know how to deal with this. So one more time, well, I'll run through it at the end of the video. So probably the way that you're going to see black do this most is he'll come back to try to block the pawn file again. So here you can regain the opposition, but now the difference is that you've gained a rank in space, and he's lost a rank in space. So you're moving down the board. This is you're making progress here. Once again, he has the opposition. If he just goes back. And so the other beautiful thing is that if he just goes back to either of these squares, you'll gain the opposition again, right? So even him retreating doesn't stop his position from falling apart. He can't regroup. You have gained the opposition in all those variations. So let's have him go to the other side this time. Once again, if he comes back, if he goes for your pawn, you can just advance your pawn with check, and your king's defending it, and you will make sure that you queen there. But most likely he'll block the pawn's path, and once again opposition. And finally, uh, and even if he comes here for this, we're reaching the same position where the kings are opposed, and this pawn blocks off the square, so he's going to be forced to give you up some ground. And after here, if he goes in front of the pawn, the most active move, then you will regain the opposition, and we know this is winning because we've seen this position many times. So, I guess to recap here, uh, if you have the opposition in this position as white, which white does because it's black to move and the kings are opposed as such, then you're winning. But the important thing to remember is you need a flank around the king and force a king to give up ground like this. See, the black king would really like to play e5, but it's illegal because the white king is already controlling that square. So he'll have to settle with e6, which loses him ground. And so lots of times positions will be seen like this, where the king will be shoved all the way back in the corner, and once he's back here, he'll move back and forth, and now you can just walk up your pawn, and you don't have to worry about opposition anymore, because no matter whose turn it is, you will walk this pawn in. Alrighty, on to the next solution. So, or the next puzzle, I guess. Based on the puzzle that we just saw, how do you think you would solve this puzzle? Pause the video and let me know what you think. Alrighty, I hope you solved it. We'll see if you did. Here, I think there is, let's see. Yeah, there is one winning move here for white. One winning move. And if you said d3, that would be wrong. After d3, black will gain the opposition. And white will never be able to win it back. So one of the problems is that if white ever is trying to make any forward advancement, black can always just mirror him like this. Now, if somehow white's pawn was on e1, or rather if this was moved up here, like this, then this would still be winning for white. And the simple reason is because white would have a move. So let's just imagine that the pawn's on e1 in some crazy world. In this position, instead of moving his king, try this side, white could just play e2, pawn e2, and he would now have the opposition because it would now be black's turn, and black would only be able to move to these squares, and we'd reach a very similar position, or the same position to what we just did earlier. And this is actually exactly the same position that we just did earlier. It was mainly just to try to get you to see that e3 is the move. Here you gain the opposition, is black to move, and he can only move backwards. And after we run through a series of moves that we've seen on the other one, on the other example I showed, something like this, approximating this, then black will eventually be checkmated by a queen. Alright, this is the final puzzle or like problem I'm giving you for this pawn endgame. And this is black to move actually. So white's coming down this way. And black to move. And what is your move to draw this position? Keeping in mind opposition and previous things we've done. Alright, pause the video. Alrighty, I hope you solved it. If you chose any move, well, there's two moves. Maybe three? Does this one work? I don't remember. No, just two moves. There's two moves that work here, e4 and d4. d4 is the most accurate one, so we'll go through that one first. King d4, and as you see, I now have the opposition. White can't advance. And you might think, well, but this is good. I have this pawn, which I can push up, and this gives me a tempo. This is true. But, as I said, if you're ever pushing this pawn down the board with check, then you're doing it wrong, because eventually you'll reach this position. So as you can see, once again, right here, white needs to move to defend his pawn, and he only has one available square to defend his pawn from, because he doesn't have access to d3, because the king is covering it. So he must play here. And as you can see, black has three moves. The most accurate is just to come straight back. And after white attempts to enter the position, you just once again gain the opposition. And after we do this a couple of times, oops, not that. Once again, force me back. All right, now this is looking really familiar. I'm gonna once again black's gonna gain the opposition. If white, and here, as you remember, If white checks, black goes back in front of the pawn here, and we just reach the same position that we did all the way down the board, except for this time there's not a file behind black that he can run to, so this time he's stalemated. So good on black for finding the draw. Um, and there is, just to re-emphasize, there is no way out of this at this point. If you're already to this point, you're stuck. And actually, all the way back here, you're stuck. It's a draw all the way back whenever you lost the opposition there. So back to the beginning. Yeah, so d4 probably the best move. The same idea is with e4. It's just a little bit less. Mm, Basically, either white can move his king away from his pawn, in which case you'll win the pawn, or he could also move behind the pawn, in which case you're going to gain a bunch of space, and now this is just really weird for him. Uh, and then you'll reach the same position that you did before, or oops, or he'll push the pawn again to try to gain some space, to waste a move so that maybe he can gain the opposition. But after you just back up straight, we're going to reach the same position that we just played through, where you're going to be opposed, and he's going to check you down the board and eventually stalemate you in this king pawn king position. Alrighty, so I hope this helped you out a little bit. Try to implement these in your games and make sure you're not stalemating people if you can help it. I hope you come around to some of my videos again, and I'll see you later.